What if one day the world stopped waiting on the United States? No breaking news alerts, no dramatic collapse, no moment that felt historic. Just a quiet realization that global decisions were being made somewhere else. For most of modern history, the U.S. economy has been the reference point. When America grows, the world breathes easier. When it slows, the world tightens its grip. Investors watch American markets. Governments track American policy. Entire industries move based on signals coming from one country. But this kind of dominance has never lasted forever. Empires don't usually fall all at once. Economic leadership fades slowly, almost politely. It slips away through small decisions, shifting incentives and changing priorities. And when it happens, the world doesn't end. It reorganizes. If the United States were to lose its place as the world's leading economy, most people wouldn't notice right away. There would be no single day where headlines announce the change. Instead, there would be moments that feel disconnected at first. A major trade deal signed without American involvement. A new financial system that doesn't rely on the dollar. A technology standard decided somewhere else. Each moment feels small, but together they add up. Inside the United States, life would continue. People would go to work. Stores would stay open. The country wouldn't suddenly become unrecognizable. That's why these transitions are so easy to misunderstand. Loss of dominance doesn't look like collapse. It looks like competition. Other economies would simply grow faster. They would innovate quicker. They would trade more efficiently with each other. Over time, the U.S. would no longer be the default choice. It would be one option among many. And that subtle shift changes everything. Right now, much of the global economy is organized around American systems. Financial flows, trade routes, legal frameworks, and business norms all tend to pass through U.S.-centered structures. But once those systems stop being the most efficient, the world doesn't fight to preserve them. It moves on. Companies choose cheaper logistics. Countries choose safer reserves. Investors choose higher returns. None of this is emotional. None of it is ideological. It's practical. As this happens, economic power becomes distributed instead of concentrated. No single country replaces the United States. Instead, different regions begin to specialize. Some dominate manufacturing. Some lead finance. Some control energy. Some define technology. The world becomes a web instead of a pyramid. That web is more flexible, but also more complicated. Without one clear center, coordination becomes harder. Disagreements last longer. Crises spread differently. Global responses slow down because there's no single authority everyone waits for. But there's also a benefit. When one part of the system fails, it doesn't drag everything else with it. This is where money becomes critical. The US dollar has been the backbone of global trade for decades. It's trusted, liquid, and deeply embedded in international systems. If the US loses economic leadership, the dollar doesn't disappear. It just stops being alone. Countries would hold more currencies. Trade would be settled in regional units. Financial systems would diversify to reduce exposure to any single economy. This wouldn't be an attack on the dollar. It would be insurance. And insurance has consequences. For the United States, borrowing becomes harder. Financing deficits becomes more expensive. The ability to absorb economic mistakes shrinks. These changes don't show up as dramatic crashes. They show up as pressure. Pressure on government budgets. Pressure on interest rates. Pressure on household costs. Imported goods gradually cost more. Loans stay expensive. Public spending choices become more constrained. Not because the country is failing, but because the world is no longer subsidizing American stability by default. For workers, this means competition intensifies. Jobs don't vanish overnight, but employers demand more productivity. Wages face downward pressure in some sectors and upward pressure in others. Efficiency matters more, skills matter more, innovation matters more. The safety cushion of dominance thins. But perhaps the biggest change isn't economic at all. It's psychological. For generations, the United States has been seen as the final destination of economic success, a place where opportunity naturally flows. When that perception shifts, it changes how people think, plan, and take risks. Confidence doesn't vanish, but certainty does. Outside the United States, the story feels very different. Many countries experience this shift as relief. Economic paths open up, regional cooperation strengthens, local industries gain breathing room. Countries that once aligned themselves carefully around U.S. priorities gain flexibility. They trade with neighbors more. They invest locally. They experiment with policies that fit their own realities. This leads to growth in places that were previously constrained by global hierarchies. But this freedom isn't free. Without a single stabilizing power, mistakes are more costly. Financial missteps spread faster. Political instability becomes more dangerous when there's no obvious economic backstop. The world becomes more volatile, but also more adaptive. Crises happen differently. Instead of one massive global shock, there are multiple regional ones. Some places suffer while others remain stable. Recovery becomes uneven. This fragmentation feels messy, but it also prevents total collapse. The system bends instead of breaking. And through all of this, the United States still matters. Losing economic leadership doesn't erase influence. The country remains wealthy, innovative, and powerful, but influence has to be exercised differently. Leadership becomes negotiated rather than assumed. Partnerships matter more than dominance. Trust matters more than leverage. Credibility matters more than size. This transition can feel like decline, but it can also be recalibration. History shows that countries struggle not when they lose power, but when they refuse to adapt to its loss. In a world without a single economic leader, global relationships become more transactional. Countries cooperate where interests align and disengage where they don't. Ideology takes a back seat to pragmatism. Diplomacy becomes constant. Negotiation becomes normal. Flexibility becomes survival. The global economy becomes less predictable, but more honest. And here's the part that often gets overlooked. Most people won't notice when the shift is complete. There won't be a headline that says the era is over. There will just be a moment when American economic news stops feeling urgent to everyone else. When markets don't react the same way. When trade continues without pause. When decisions happen elsewhere quietly. And by the time someone points it out, the world has already adjusted. A world where the United States is no longer the leading economy is not a broken world. It's a rebalanced one. More complex. More competitive. More shared. It demands adaptability instead of dominance, collaboration instead of control. The question is whether this future is good or bad. The real question is whether societies, businesses, and governments are ready to operate in a world without a single economic center. Because the shift doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with silence. And by the time we realize the world has stopped revolving around one economy, we're already living in the next era. So the final question is simple. When the center of gravity moves, do we move with it? Or do we keep standing where it used to be?